Hey guys, Sean Ryan here. I'm super excited to announce a project that I've been working on. I partnered with IRONCLAD for their newest original series, Target Intelligence PSYOP. It's an 8-part audio experience where we find out who is really pulling the strings. Buy it today, it's psyopshow.com. Link is in the show notes. The stakes have never been higher.
DHS released this very dramatic warning that Mexican cartels are offering bounties to kill US federal law enforcement. And it basically outlines this tiered bounty structure. So $2,000 for doxing or gathering intelligence on agents, $5,000 to $10,000 for non-lethal assault or kidnappings, and up to $50,000 for assassination of high-ranking officials. My first thoughts when I saw this were absolutely not. I could truly never see any of the major Mexican cartels be so brazen, because that's what this is. It is very brazen. And you know what? An issue that I encountered in the last episode about the narcomanta threatening Cash Patel and, DEA, whatever, was that a lot of people said, and I understand this, that it sounds like I'm defending the cartels. That is not the case. The case here is that this is what I am constantly consuming, is this organized crime content, and you start to gather an understanding of their MO. And publicly threatening, attacking, or inciting violence against the United States government is simply not how they roll. It is bad for business. And people brought up to me, fair question, well, then why do they put out deadly fentanyl onto the streets? Because it is lucrative. This is not at all, okay? And sure, people will die of fentanyl overdoses, but a new addict will always come up from the weeds. There will never cease to be an insatiable appetite for drugs, particularly synthetic drugs. Period. This, however, is odd. This bounty. So DHS says this is based on quote unquote credible intelligence, and framed the criminal networks as organizing campaigns of terror against border agents. And I want to say almost a year ago, I was given a internal note that was passed around to CBP officers saying, be very vigilant if you're, working the border and patrolling, because there had been some intelligence that low-level cartel members were going to become violent to CBP at the border. And I received this doc and I published it. And now, though, this goes kind of to a different level. This is more amplified, because unlike, okay, you have a coyote who's saying that they may start shooting at a CBP truck, this is saying that someone has the incentive of $50,000 to kill a CBP officer. That's a lot of money, and that's very extreme. So I think for the longest time, particularly since, this administration, it began in January, there has been somewhat of an underlying threat for these federal agents. But do I think that the cartel is going to say, we'll give everyone 50 grand for killing these guys? No. Again, bad for business. And I know that, sometimes you guys disagree with this when I do this type of analysis, and I understand why, but I typically try to look at these guys from a business perspective, because at the end of the day, that's what they care about. They care about their money and making sure that their financial pipelines stay alive. And this bounty situation is not something that ties back to protecting their money. Sure, the southern border has been locked down and certain financial pipelines have taken a hit. Killing these guys isn't going to make that any better, okay? So I was kind of trying to trace the origin of like what the source could be of this instead of me just blindly telling you guys. I just don't think that this is really like this significant threat, and I don't think that we're actually going to see people like going and shooting up a federal agent and then getting a $50,000 in cash in a duffel bag or like some sort of remittance transfer. So DHS tied the threat to a recent federal indictment in Chicago, implicating a Latin King gang member accused of placing a bounty on a CBP operations commander. Okay, so we're talking about Latin Kings now, and that's very much US. So according to DHS, gangs, including Latin Kings, deployed armed spotters on rooftops, feeding real-time movement data of ICE and CBP operations via radios. Now, I covered the ICE protests in LA earlier in the summer, and to be completely honest, I know that everything going on with ICE and the National Guard in the United States is extremely polarized, and whether the individuals targeting these federal agents are Latin King members or a regular civilian who is mad at the situation, it's very hard to determine, okay, who's more dangerous. We see constant videos of the protests, a lot of them that turn into riots and there's violence. I'm not taking a stand on this policy here. I'm just saying that this is a polarized and very complicated situation. And so to tie this into Mexican cartels are attacking ICE and CBP, sorry, is, I don't know, it's odd to me. I don't even really have the words because also there isn't much information, and I'm trying to do this digging. But so the Washington Examiner published elements of the same threat that DHS put in this post prior to this DHS post, which sort of suggests to me that the warning may have been drawn from open source or investigative reporting and not wholly from internal intelligence, okay? The Examiner even says, I want to pull it up, that it's an exclusive. Federal law enforcement believes bounties placed on the heads of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement sweeping the streets of Chicago originated in Mexico, and that local gangs are actively trying to carry out the assassinations. DHS shared internal information from the DEA with the Washington Examiner, stating how gangs in Chicago's southwest neighborhoods were offered bounties between $5,000 and $50,000 for each ICE employee assassination. I'd be curious to know how legit these threats were. And, you know, I always also have trouble like being critical of some reputable journalists and outlets being critical of their sources, because I know a lot of people are very critical of my sources when I do my due diligence. That sounds horrible. When I conduct my due diligence. And so, sure, there may have been, at least in my humble opinion, there may have been some low-level threats that were occurring. Do I think that this rises up to high-ranking officials of criminals in Mexico and the cartels? That's hard for me to believe. Do I think that any individual who carried out an assassination would have received $50,000? Also, very hard for me to believe. I think that right now what we're seeing with the whole immigration situation in the United States is causing a lot of drama, anger, hatred from every side of the gauntlet here. And it's hard to kind of dig through this information and pick out what's true, what's not, what's a false flag, honestly. So this timeline sort of raises that possibility that DHS may have repackaged some of their intelligence from law enforcement investigations or seizure of digital communications like phone messages and used it for this public threat advisory.
Hey guys, Sean Ryan here. I'm super excited to announce a project that I've been working on. I partnered with IRONCLAD for their newest original series, Target Intelligence PSYOP. It's an 8-part audio experience where we find out who is really pulling the strings. Buy it today, it's psyopshow.com. Link is in the show notes. The stakes have never been higher.